What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the second episode of the Fantasy Hoops podcast for SacKingsNation.com. Joining me today is very special guest, FanDuel writer, senior NBA writer, Mr. Alan Goldsher. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Just enjoying another Wednesday night out here in Sacramento.
Yeah.
So, for people that don't really know about who you are or anything like that, or about FanDuel in general, kind of give them a little sense about who you are and what you bring to this daily fantasy knowledge that you have being a senior writer at FanDuel.com.
Okay, well, actually, this is a really good opportunity for me to kind of out FanDuel's insider page to the rest of the world. I've been writing for FanDuel since the beginning of last season, mostly doing game predictions and power rankings. And then over the summer, the powers that be over at FanDuel at the mothership decided, you know what, we need to amp up our content. And thus FanDuel Insider, which was just kind of a blog back in the day, has become a thing. We have, I think, 15 some odd writers in our disposal. We have a bunch of football writers. We have a bunch of baseball writers. We have a couple basketball writers. And while the season, while we're in the off season, I've been doing a lot of kind of speculative things. I've been doing I actually did a huge piece about the Sacramento Kings, which you can go check out on the website. And now, obviously, we're doing previews. We're talking about what's going to happen in the upcoming season, both in fantasy and reality. Because we don't want to just cover fantasy sports. That's our objective. That's our main thrust. But we also want to cover sports. We want to cover people. We want to tell stories. Our goal at FanDuel is to make sports more fun, and we're going to try and do that with our new content team. And our new site is actually launching on the 31st, on Monday, so we're all really excited about that.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump into this fantasy thing right now, and let's talk about daily fantasy. So with daily fantasy, it's completely different than a season-long fantasy type of situation where
it is.
You're literally scouting players, looking at the waiver wires. Daily fantasy is not like that. It's more like who's on a hot streak, who's going to give you those points on a daily basis, or so when people are looking at these daily fantasy lineups, what are certain things that they should be eyeballing right away, as in like stats that really matter the most and stats that really don't?
Well, what you said about it being a different animal than season long is absolutely right. You have to come at it with a completely different mindset. Your big push for season long is before the draft. Your first 6-8 picks in your draft, that's who you're going to be with all year. And if you blow those, you're going to have a lousy team, like I did last year. Goran Dragic. And whereas is daily, it requires, if you're going to do it for real, if you're going to do it, you should do it for real. And doing it for real means doing the research. And, it's all fine and good to find guys on hot streaks. But a hot streak is a hot streak, and it can become a cold streak just like that. What's just as important are the little things, like, are we on a tail end of a home and away back-to-back? Are we on a fourth game of a 4-game and 5-night situation? Are we playing a team that's crazy hot and has held five straight teams to under 95 points? That, to me, the matchups, the circumstances, are just as important as the hot streaks and the numbers. And I think one of the other big differences, I know one of the other big differences is we don't care in the daily world about shooting percentages. You could miss a million free. You could be Dwight Howard and DeAndre Jordan's love child, and it doesn't matter. As long as you get your 20 points and your 12 boards, you can miss all the free throws you want. We don't care.
So with FanDuel, could this be a potential for where people can actually find a way to make real money off of it? I mean, is it?
There are people that make livings off of it.
Wow.
And the spreadsheets that these guys put together, I mean, it's a job. It is a real honest-to-goodness job. And, I would do that too, but I have to write. I just don't have the time to stare at spreadsheets. I think I do pretty well with the basketballreference.com and just the latest stats and logic, but there are guys out there. My God, the amount of work they do, more power to them because they earn their money.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go ahead and jump into exactly what we were talking about prior to the show when I asked if you can come on the show, and that is sleepers. I want to talk about sleepers because there's players out there that people overlook each year, whether that be a season-long draft where you're drafting these players and you're scouting them, whether that be from the waiver wire leading up to the draft, or these daily fantasy leagues where you're looking at them like, who can provide me that's low-end value? Because, I mean, it costs to get each player, if I'm correct. Because I'm thinking of – because I've done it before. Like I said, I told you on the phone, I didn't do daily fantasy a lot. I just kind of tiptoed into it last year. So when I'm looking for players that, you know, cost only like $2 to have on my team. You know what I mean? Like they're 2 points to have. A guy like maybe Al-Farouq Aminu, who kind of came on a little bit, you know, with Dallas last season. So who are some key sleepers to you? And even you can even bring up your piece that I read. So who are some key sleepers to you that people should keep their eye on, whether that be daily fantasy or even season long?
Well, I think Aminu is a great place to start. He looked wonderful during the playoffs last year. He's always been kind of a defensive beast, but you know, give him his time, give him his court time. You could be looking at a good, solid, 13 points, 8 boards, 5-6 assists, which his FanDuel cap hit, at least at the beginning of the year, is going to be in like the $5,000 to $6,000 range, which is like the low for non-FanDuel players. 5,000-6,000 is sort of the low end of mid-range, if that makes sense. And, when you're building your roster, you want to get as many of those guys as you can that can produce so you can afford to bring, Anthony Davis on board for $12,000 or Russell Westbrook on board for $13,000. Aminu, I think early on in the season, because Portland is in such flux right now, I think that he's got a chance to really carve out a niche for himself. Whether they give him the minutes, I think Portland is a really interesting situation for. It's like Sleeper City. Forget Rip City. It's Sleeper City. You've got C.J. McCollum, who, if he gets minutes, can make some noise. You've got the Myers Leonard, Mason Plumlee situation in the middle. You've got Noah Vonleh. I mean, it's a really interesting. We know that Damian Lillard is going to be a stud, and we know that he's going to be one of the high-end go-to guys because he is going to be dominating the ball.
He's going to be the guy.
He's going to be the guy, one of the guys in the league. He's going to be. I bet he averages like 37, 38 minutes a night.
Oh yeah, for
the whole season.
There's no help out there but McCollum.
Nothing. Yeah, they've got no backcourt. So that means there is a huge vacuum that needs to be filled, and Aminu might be that guy.
Definitely. Yeah, and you said it, Sleeper City. That's what it is. That's what Portland is. And the guy that you brought up, and I completely agree, he's on my sleeper list here, and that's Mason Plumlee. I think Plumlee, from what he did in Brooklyn as a starter over Brook Lopez, proved he can put in fantasy numbers. He can put in team numbers regardless, and just that fact as well. So when I'm looking at a guy like Mason Plumlee, I'm excited to see what he's going to do. And honestly, I see him as the projected starter going into Game 1 with Portland. Like, Portland has to have him as their number one starter right now, correct?
Yeah, and when Lopez went down, when Brook Lopez went down last year in December, and Plumlee, took over the starting position for a good 2-ish months, and Lopez actually had to earn his spot back. In terms of fantasy numbers, in terms of FanDuel numbers, the dude was putting up like 35, 40, 45 FanDuel points a night, which is ridiculous. And his cap hit at the beginning of that run, because he wasn't getting any minutes before that, was in the upper 5,000s, and it scooched up to the lower 7,000s. But for what he was giving you, it was a phenomenal price. I mean, there were some nights he would get you 45 points for $6,400, and I think his cap hit is going to be right around there at the beginning of the season in Portland if he is the starter. I don't think he's going to, quite reach the heights that he reached in Brooklyn for that, magical 4 to 6 week period. But, he's absolutely worth a look. And again, as is anybody there. Having said all that, when I'm building my lineups at the beginning of the season, I'm going to be a little leery about both Portland and Dallas players, because both of those teams are in major flux. The rotations are going to take a while to suss out. And as I'm sure you've heard, the manna from heaven in terms of daily fantasy is minutes. You need to get guys who are going to play 30, 35 minutes a night. And if, Rick Carlisle and Terry Stotts are trying to suss out their rotations, you're going to be getting guys who are playing 25 minutes a night. So I back off of them at the beginning of the season, at least for like the first couple of weeks. And, if Plumlee does establish himself as the starter and is playing 30, 35 minutes a night, yeah, jump on him.
Definitely. So let's move to the team that he came from, and that's Brooklyn, because I feel like there's a sleeper over there that people are overlooking now that Darren Williams is gone, and I have him on my list right here in front of me, and that is Jarrett Jack now as the starter in Brooklyn. What's your thoughts on Jarrett Jack as a daily fantasy player, being that when he was a starter, I mean, he was putting up minutes, and we saw what he can do in minutes, whether that be as a starter for Brooklyn or even, was it 2 seasons ago now when he was the sixth man for Golden State?
Mm-hmm. I'm a little nervous about Brooklyn as a whole. They're a weird mishmash of talents. Joe Johnson's kind of lost 3 or 4 steps. Their bench has just got decimated over the offseason. And, I'm looking at it like Brook Lopez in a cast of thousands.
Brook Lopez is always broke in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was bonkers at the end of last season. So if he stays healthy, he's going to be there. He's going to be the Damian Lillard of Brooklyn. He's the guy.
Big if, though, huge if.
True that. I can't argue with that. But the thing is, like, Jack was putting up he had some crazy double doubles, and if no one's putting the ball in the basket, it's going to be hard for him to get 12 assists a night. I'm very nervous about Brooklyn. I'm taking a wait and see attitude with Jack. But having said that, yeah, he had a run last season, end of January, beginning of February, when big minutes, big points, lots of fun to watch. And, he's absolutely, Vince, no question, a guy to keep an eye on.
So let's go ahead and keep going on in this East Coast, because that's where I see a lot of these sleepers is out in the East. And that's because there's a lot of teams out in the East that are, let's be honest, poor teams, and there's always going to be those guys. And you said sleeper team is Portland. Another sleeper team that I have a few players I think could be really good as a sleeper is Philadelphia. Not because they're going to be a really good team, but because these certain players are going to shine really well in a team that needs offense, that needs help. And the guy I have, he's coming off of injury. We talked about it, like I said, prior to this show, like a few days ago. And that's Tony Wroten. He is one of my favorites going into any daily fantasy or even season-long fantasies.
I love me some Tony Wroten. I would be nervous about him. Yeah, I'd be nervous about him in season-long because his percentages are so bad and he does turn the ball over a lot, but he can score. The guy can flat-out shoot, and he's just one of those, heat check guys that keep scoring. And he can dish, and if you've got Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor to dump the ball down to, get them a couple easy buckets. Next thing you know, you're looking at 20 points and 6, 7, 8 assists. And that is a terrific stat line for, daily or season-long fantasy. I look forward to watching him. He's had trouble staying healthy too. So hopefully he'll be able to maintain his health and will reap the fruits of his labor.
One guy that I feel like is still trying to prove his name, mainly because of the injury that he had when he first came into his rookie year, but towards the end of last season, he really showed promise, and that's Nerlens Noel. And he's a guy who can block shots. He's a guy who can get a ton of rebounds. Maybe he's not going to get you a ton of points, especially now that Jahlil Okafor is no doubt going to get minutes with Joel Embiid now again out for another season. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at a guy like Nerlens Noel, is he one of those guys where he has the potential to be a sleeper and then a possible go-to player for most guys in daily fantasy?
Actually, last year at the end of the season, when he went on that tear, he was a stud. He is no longer a sleeper in FanDuel land because he just fills up the box score. He just fills it up from top to bottom, and like you said, Okafor's presence is just gonna make things easier for him. there's only so much, like you said about the East, there's size. That as a conference, it's a small conference, and Noel and Okafor, that just like that, they're one of the biggest front lines out there. They'll get a lot of boards. They'll get a lot of putbacks. They'll get a lot of blocks. And, I'm a little leery about jumping on Okafor for daily, again, at the beginning of the year until he establishes his minutes and his stats. But Noel, I mean, if I'm in my season-long draft, I'm going to target him. And in my daily games, if I can fit him under the cap and the matchup is right, yeah, I'm all over the guy.
Once again, guys, you are listening to the Fantasy Hoop Podcast presented by SatKingsNation.com. Joining us today is Alan Goldsher of FanDuel.com. Now, I have a list of these players here that I'm just looking at, but is there one name that, before I even get to this name or any of these other names, I want to know off the top of your head, unless we already hit on it, who is that top player that is a deep sleeper right now that people should know about?
We have hit on a bunch of them, but I'm going to throw Aaron Gordon out there. I really like what's going on in Orlando a lot. I think Scott Skiles is going to whip those guys into shape. They have a great cocky attitude, like cocky but not too cocky. And Gordon, I mean, they've had a massive void at power forward for a long time. And I think he's going to fill it. I think he's going to go out there and get his, maybe not a double-double because you've got Nik Vujicic in the middle clogging things up, but I can see him being like a good solid 13-9 guy, couple blocks, and again, next thing you know, if he's a FanDuel cap hit in the 5,000s and he's getting you 25, 30 FanDuel points a night, I mean that's money, literally and figuratively. Would I target him in a season long? I don't know about that. No. I would take a wait and see.
Yes.
But daily, keep your eyes peeled because again, if the matchup's right and he's on a roll, he could be a really good guy to allow you to afford James Harden.
Yeah, that's an interesting name because when you said that, I don't know if you heard me, but I had to say wow because that's a very interesting name because although Aaron Gordon showed promise in Summer League, I mean, he was shooting three-pointers. What he was doing out there in Orlando was nice, but at the same time, it was one of those things where I'm like, it's Aaron Gordon, though, because Aaron Gordon really didn't show too much. I mean, he's still coming off the bench. There's still a guy like Tobias Harris in front of him getting minutes. Even a guy like maybe Evan Fournier possibly pushing to get more minutes for the way that they're going to start playing. So I'm away
You're
from
skeptical?
him. I'm skeptical of him for daily and for when I go into my season longs. So he's one of those names where, honestly, that came off left field for me right there.
I'm a fan. I think he's got game. He did look stellar in the summer leagues. He looked terrific out there. He was, I think, the best athlete in his draft class. And, Orlando runs.
Well, wasn't Ben McLemore in that draft class?
Again, yeah, he was one of the best athletes in the draft class. I'm not a Ben McLemore fan.
Stop it. This is SatKingsNation.com presents the fantasy.
Dude, Ben killed me last year with fantasy. He was one of those guys who, with daily, it's one thing if you've got season long and you can catch him a couple good games in 1 week. But if you look at him one game, it's like, oh, he dropped 15 points and got like 8 assists. So yeah, I'm going to pick him up this week because he only cost me $4,300. And then he scores like 6 points and plays 22 minutes. I'm sure he's a wonderful man. Sure, he's a terrific family guy, but fantasy wise, I'm not sold on him.
Okay. Well, I mean, I said season long and daily fantasy. That's where the difference is because if you're looking at a guy like Ben McLemore and you're looking at a guy like Aaron Gordon, there is no doubt in my mind any season long player chooses Ben McLemore over Aaron Gordon all day, every day.
Probably, but I bet let's talk in January. I could see Aaron Gordon being one of those waiver wire pickups that
over Tobias Harris.
Oh, I think Tobias Harris is a good draft guy. He's a guy that you take in your draft. But I think Harris is going to start at the 3 and Gordon's going to start at the 4. So I think they'll be on the court at the same time.
But when I'm thinking of their roster, I'm still thinking Evan Fournier has a chance to show big minutes. Do they keep Channing Frye? I can't remember if Orlando kept Channing Frye.
He's there.
See, so I mean, and though he didn't show a lot, I mean, last season he was up and down completely, especially as a veteran. But when he does play, he is solid. I mean, Channing Frye is a solid veteran, and I see them going Channing Frye above Aaron Gordon, no matter what they show in Summer League, because Summer League can be deceiving. I mean, let's be honest, it's Summer League basketball. So, like I said, Aaron Gordon, like I said, is one of those guys that I have to be very skeptical of and be afraid of when I'm looking at him in any fantasy format.
And I respect that. I keep an open mind. Tell you what, Vince, I'll keep an open mind on McLemore. You keep an open mind on Gordon.
See, there you go. See, we can help each other out. It's
exactly.
season long and daily.
Exactly. We can coexist happily.
So since we are talking about Aaron Gordon and we did talk about Summer League, let's hit on rookies that can be really effective in daily fantasy leagues. And one guy that you even wrote about as a sleeper, and I have him as one of my top rookies going into any of my drafts. And I do more season long than I do daily. So that's why we're going to kind of differentiate. But at the same time, we'll kind of find that nice blend between the two of us, which I really like, is Miles Turner. I think Miles Turner in Indiana is going to be nice, especially now that Roy Hibbert is gone.
He's going to get all kinds of minutes. He's going to get all kinds of opportunity. And he's kind of, if you're going to have a rookie in that situation, he's kind of the perfect guy because they need to move. They need to pick up the pace out there. And he's speedy, Turner is. He's a lot faster than I thought he would be. I mean, you saw him in the summer leagues, right?
Oh, yeah. He showed so much offense that I did not expect him to have. That turnaround jumper, though.
And he swatted everything that came his way. It was a pleasure to watch him. And I think Indiana's going to give him every opportunity to succeed. I got to speak with Frank Vogel a couple months ago, and he's very open-minded about what's going to happen with this team. You know, he's got Paul George coming back. He's got a basically revamped roster, and I think they're going to give Turner every chance to succeed. And whether he takes advantage early, late, on and off, who knows? But he's a good fantasy guy. To season long, I'd wait on him on daily too, just to kind of see what he does. But I think we'll know within the first 2-3 weeks of the season. We will confirm what we all saw in the summer leagues. I have high hopes for him.
Yeah, he's one of my guys where I'm looking at, because I had Matt Smith from RotoWire on, and we were talking about season longs last week on our very first episode. And he was, again, one of those guys that we brought up. Miles Turner is a guy that everyone is bringing up fantasy-wise that I'm talking to, and especially because of what we saw in, Orlando and what happened with Roy Hibbert. And there's something about him that just makes you feel confident, where for season-long wise, maybe not daily fantasy because you want to see who he is, but for season-long wise, if I'm coming down to the end of my draft and I'm looking at only rookies left, and I need a shot blocker who I feel is going to grab a ton of rebounds because of his motor, and is just going to – and he shoots the ball well. He can take free throws well, and you're looking at 9 categories for most people. He is definitely a guy you have to scoop up when you're coming toward that late, mid, and end of your draft, to where league-wise, season-long-wise, you have to have him on your roster. You're going to want him because he has the potential to be what Hassan Whiteside is now. That's how I feel about him.
Positionally, this has nothing in common with him, but it reminds me of Michael Carter-Williams in my season-long league that year. Nobody took MCW in the draft at all, and when he started knocking out of the park, only 2 weeks into the season, he started balling and putting up numbers galore. I missed picking him up by 10 minutes because one of the guys on the East Coast got to the computer before I did. I think Miles Turner is going to be that guy. I think he's going to be the guy that people might be kicking themselves. Could have taken him in the last round, and someone will snatch him up off of the waiver wire the second week of the season. So, yeah, I think it's a wise idea to – I'm with you. I would consider him for my season long, and I'm going to keep a close eye on him for FanDuel.
While we're sticking on this team, before I move on to the next rookie, I want to stay with Indiana for a quick second and talk about a guy like Paul George, because he is coming back. I mean, he came back for a little bit toward the end of the season last year, but now he's back. And we're hearing this rumor going around that he's going to be playing power forward. And I feel like if that happens, that's going to affect his fantasy. And not in a good way, in my opinion, because he can't bang down low with those big boys down there. And so if that means he's taking more threes because they want to be a more fast-paced offense, and on top of that, they're adding a guy like Monte Ellis, who, yes, showed he can pass the ball in Dallas last year. Before they brought in Rondo, Dallas was nice with having Monte Ellis run that offense. But, I mean, at the same time, now Indiana needs more offense because they're not relying on George Hill and Paul George anymore. They're going to look for everyone to chip in, and now they have a guy like Monte Ellis who can shoot the ball. I'm a little nervous about Paul George's fantasy value right now, whether that be daily or season long.
Well, I'm going to actually just sort of take another stance on the PG at power forward thing. I don't think it's a bad idea, and I'll tell you why. Because the East as a whole is not a very big and bulky conference. You know, you've got guys like Patrick Patterson and David Lee and Thad Young. These are not large individuals, and I think George has the speed to, you know, run circles around them, and he's got the size. He's a good rebounder. He's not a great rebounder, but he's a very good rebounder. And, you know, do you see David Lee shoving him out of the way like a rusty David Lee?
Yes, I do. Honestly, I do. He could think about it. He came off the bench for Golden State when they never really used him. He can bang down low and then get you with a nice pass. Does he need to score all the time? No, but David Lee as a big man is a really good passer. You brought in a guy like Patrick Patterson. You say his name out there. One thing that he is really good at is something that Ryan Anderson is a lot better than him at, and that's posting and then doing that little step-back jumper that he knows how to do. And all they need to do is create space, and Patrick Patterson is a shooter. Thaddeus Young, maybe that's the best matchup for him, but also at the 4, you say he's a good rebounder, and I completely agree with you. As a guard, Paul George is a good rebounder, but he's one of those rebounders that are good from coming out from the wing and jumping into the paint and jumping over players. Do you really see him being able to box out a guy like David Lee, who at one point averaged a double-double, and he knows how to he can work a guy. This is no offense to Paul George at all. If he ever listens to this podcast, I mean, I'd love to have him on. You know what I mean? But David Lee can shove him around a little bit. He's a bigger dude.
But, you know, Paul can out-jump him. He's way
offensively,
faster.
you're right. Offensively, David Lee better switch. You know what I mean? But
yeah. No, I mean, ultimately, I don't think it's a bad thing. It might not be the best thing, but I think he will be fine at power forward. And, you know, small ball is going to be the way to go. I like the combination. I would rather see Paul George and Miles Turner as the front line than Miles Turner and Jordan Hill.
That's true, because I do not like Jordan Hill either.
No, so that's just kind of my thinking. The only problem there, and I actually just wrote about this in a little season preview book we're going to have coming out in at the end of September. It's called The Black Book. Keep your eyes peeled for it. Is that if George moves to the 4, they got nothing at the 3. They got Chase Budinger and Solomon Hill, which they're perfectly good 7th or 8th guys, but you know those aren't the kind of small forwards that are going to get you past the first round of the playoffs.
So let's go ahead and move on to another rookie now, and we hit on it a little bit while we were talking about this team, and that's Jahlil Okafor. Mm-hmm. And what are we expecting from him out there next to Nerlens Noel? I mean, I'm expecting kind of big things to where, I mean, offensively. Defensively, I mean, there's a question mark, but I mean, he has a guy like Nerlens Noel behind him. Could this be something like maybe Nerlens Noel is the Rudy Gobert for Philly and Jahlil Okafor could be that Derek Favors type of player? I'm not saying that they're similar at all, but I mean the style of which they're setting up that front court is kind of similar to what Utah did, correct?
Absolutely. It's hard. It's going to be hard to get a read on Okafor early on, and even in the preseason, I think it's going to be difficult. You know, a lot of people questioned his athleticism, whether he is as athletic as you want him to be. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, he's not.
Yeah. Nerlens Noel, however, is insanely athletic. He's very bouncy, that Nerlens Noel. And is he going to be the Rudy Gobert? Is he going to be the Derek Favors? I don't know. I'm loving Derek Favors, by the way, as a daily and as a season long.
Completely agree.
Actually, today, as a matter of fact, I was writing. We have a little feature called the FanDuel 15, which is our power rankings. And for the last, up until about midway through the season last year, Derek Favors was like my fantasy kryptonite. both season and daily. He killed me in every way imaginable. And then one day he didn't. One day he was amazing, and I'm in love with the guy. I think he's going to be one of the in my season long, I would consider taking him as high as the third round. He's that good. He's going to be that good.
Yeah, that's kind of where I project him as well.
Yeah,
he's one of those guys that, like you said, if he can find consistency, I mean, and his defense steps up a little bit more, and maybe he won't be as good as him, but he's kind of like a poor man's Paul Millsap. Where I kind of
I think that's a very apt comparison. I think I would mention them in the same breath. And fantasy-wise, Atlanta Hawks are a little rough because they share the ball so much. How dare they?
Paul Millsap was a helper for me last season, though. Season long wise, for a little while, the time he was leading the league in steals as a power forward. So I was like, having him and then him putting up the numbers that he did, plus the passes, and then I think it was like 0.9 threes for a while. I was like, okay, he's filling up the stat sheet, giving me good free throws, giving me good field goal, giving me less turnovers. He was a guy that you needed to have on your team. He had high fantasy trade value, high fantasy value all season long, and then of course he got injured.
But he's a perfect example, Vince, of a guy that's radically different in daily versus season long. In season long, he's the ideal season long player. He just piles up the stats. But on daily, and it's tough with the Hawks. You never know who's going to be the guy from night to night. It could be Horford, it could be Teague, it could be Millsap, it could even be Korver. And he just is one of those guys. He usually has a pretty high cap hit because he does have those games once or twice a week, and he has like killer scary games once or twice a month. So he's going to cost you like low 8,000s, high 7,000s. So people tend to shy away a little bit because you're not sure what you're going to get for that $7,000-8,000. And when you're spending that much money on one of your key players, you have to feel really confident that that's the guy tonight. But yeah, the season long, you're absolutely right. And I think the comparison with Favors is completely apt, and I could see them being equal type players.
We kind of got off of it a little bit. So value wise, where do you see Jahlil Okafor landing? Because I mean, he is one of those sleepers for me where offensively he can be really nice, and he can probably get you a steal, and he can do a little bit of everything like here and there. And so I kind of have him as maybe like a very cheap and could rise, or he's going to stay cheap all season long daily fantasy wise.
He's actually I feel like that because he's got the name recognition and he's kind of sexy. He might be overpriced at the beginning of the year, and especially like we were talking about Tony Roten earlier. We've kind of touched on Nerlens Noel. There are going to be guys on Philly that will have the ball in their hands a lot. Let's not forget Robert Covington, who was kind of one of my little sleeper dudes last year. He can put up some points for you too. I think he should be a little bit lower valued, but he probably won't be because I'm in Chicago. I've been hearing about this guy for years now, so I'm going to lay off of him for a little while. I'm going to wait for him to show me a little something before I make a move.
Let's talk about my team's rookie and how he can do both daily and season long, and that is Willie Cauley-Stein. What do you think about what do you think about Willie Trill? Do you think he has some type of value to where maybe he can be like, again, maybe a Nerlens Noel type of guy to where if he gets the minutes, and that's the big if about Willie Cauley-Stein and him out in Sacramento, is he a starter? Is it Costa Koufis? Are they going to go small ball? Is it Rudy Gay? So you definitely, with daily, you're going to have to wait a long while till you see. I think you're going to need to at least wait 15 to 20 games to see if he finds a definitive role, especially with that whole commenting of George Karl doesn't really like to play rookies, although I wrote a piece on royalpain.com that everyone can go check out to where I kind of feel like that's a ridiculous statement that is just piled on by the fact that the rookies that he had weren't really rookies. They were second-round picks, which still are rookies, but regardless. So I feel like you need to find where he's going to find his footing and where he actually is on this team. But if he's a starter, or if, let's say, he gets around 20 minutes a game, 20 to 25 minutes a game, could he be one of those guys that gets you a block, a few rebounds? Is that daily fantasy value-wise, or is that more like waiver wire daily pickups for maybe like a certain matchup type of situation?
Yeah, daily fantasy wise, you need to get more out of it, like a block or two. You pick up a guy that can get you like 3 blocks in a week in season long, and you've won your week. So he could be really valuable in that respect. But daily wise, if he gets you 3 blocks and 2 points and 5 boards, that's really not a lot of value, even though he'll probably only cost about $4,000 to $5,000. And I actually would ask you this. I was live tweeting the draft, and when they picked him, when Sacramento picked him up, that was definitely the say what pick of the first part of the draft. What was the reception like out there?
I was actually at the Kings draft party when that pick was happening. So when I'm watching that draft, the one thing I noticed was everyone was eyeballing what Orlando was going to do, because the pick, no doubt in my mind, the pick was Mario Hezonja if he was available at 7. No doubt that was going to happen. You can ask any NBA beat writer out here, they will tell you Mario Hezonja was the pick. That's the guy who they wanted to get.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he wasn't there, Willie Cauley-Stein was that guy. All that rumor about trades, there was never a team that really threw out the value for it. Now, it was on the table to trade DeMarcus Cousins, but no one really threw out the value to which they were going to get anything back in return. So when you're at the draft and you saw Mario Hezonja gone, personally, I wanted them to trade that pick and get more assets for what they could have got at that pick. And again, Emmanuel Mudiay was available, Stanley Johnson. Who's the guy that went to Miami? I can't think. Justice Winslow.
Yeah.
So I mean, you had a mixture, but overall, because of the way Sacramento is right now, they're Sacramento proud. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the videos, but look it up on YouTube for anyone who is listening right now that's out there. Hashtag Sacramento proud is a big thing for us, and we have the new arena coming. So no matter who they picked, honestly, it was going to get picked up as a great pick. But for the ones that when you're looking at it, you're like, okay, now we have a mean front court. But then the offseason happened, and you got guys like Costa Koufis. You got, again, a guy like Quincy Acey, who's with Hustle. And where he fits in, I really don't know how they're going to do it. He's definitely going to get minutes. He showed that he deserves minutes from Summer League, or at least a chance to get minutes. And so the reception of it was awesome. I kind of went off tangent a little bit, but the reception of him was awesome. But pick-wise, I mean, no one knew what they were going to do. Most assumed they were going to trade the pick to get more picks, but no one knew what they were going to do, whether that was going to be Emmanuel Mudiay, whether that was going to be Justice Winslow, whether that was going to be, Stanley Johnson. I mean, they had all these names going around.
I love all 3 of those players. And if I was a Kings guy, I probably would have been rooting for Mudiay. I think he's going to be he's my early front runner for Rookie of the Year. He's going to get all the run he can ask for in Denver. He's going to be able to just like zip up and down the court. He's going to be given the keys to the car. He's got tons of athleticism. He's a little raw, but aren't they all? And I think he's got a chance to shine. Stanley Johnson looked utterly bestial in the summer leagues.
He looked amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I always liked him. I always felt good about him. I felt like he was being undervalued, but Detroit's the perfect place for him to be. I mean, that was, they were targeting him. Every mock draft in the world had him going there, even mine. And my mock draft was brutal. I shouldn't admit that on a podcast, but it was. But I got that. Everybody got that one right, and I think he's going to be a day one starter. And that's a guy that I would target in my season long league.
What about Willie Cauley-Stein, though? I mean, that's my big
Stein.
Question. I mean, daily fan. It's a wait and see type of approach with him, huh?
It's a player like that does the dirty work and doesn't get points on top of it is not a really desirable guy, especially if he's not going to get more than 20 minutes a night. And like I said, if he gets you 3-4 blocks a week, that's
awesome.
Gold.
Yeah.
That's gold season long. But for daily, he's not really going to offer much. And the Kings are going to have some growing pains early on in the season. But let's reconnect in March and see if DeMarcus has his every other monthly injury and Koufos turns out to be just okay. Maybe all of a sudden they're going to play a Twin Towers thing.
Everyone go listen to the Kings Score podcast on Sundays to hear about the bet that's going on about if the Kings make the playoffs. Just throwing that out there. Just throwing that out there. That's on YouTube. That's on everything. Check that out. But you brought up Emmanuel Mudiay, your front runner for Rookie of the Year. I have him as my front runner of the Rookie Year. I understand why the Kings passed on him. I mean, Vlade Divac said why he didn't pass on him. I mean, he wouldn't come work out for us, and you didn't want to trust only 12 games of, China play. So, but I feel like if the Kings were going to go after a guy like that, I mean, they already picked up Rondo, so I mean, I would have chosen Emmanuel Mudiay too. But in Denver, I mean, he's going to be the guy in control. I mean, Michael Malone has already said that he's given him the keys to this franchise, and with a guy like Danilo Gallinari and Kenneth Faried and Wilson Chandler, I kind of a little bit feel like that Denver can be a team that shouldn't be overlooked too much as a garbage team. I feel like that they have a chance to be a pretty decent team.
And they've got a lot of really good players. Don't forget Wilson Chandler, Randy Foye. I'm a big J.J. Hickson fan. He gets
Stop
some
it.
daily fantasy.
Us Kings fans don't like that trade. Stop it.
Okay, there's that. But, as a daily fantasy guy, if there's inevitably someone banged up on the Nuggets, it seems like he's almost, if he's starting, he's good for like a double-double a week, that J.J. Hickson. And I think the Nuggets, I don't see them as a playoff team because the West is so stacked, but I'm not going to want to go into Denver and play them.
No. But let's just start wrapping it up here and get on to our final subject that I do want to kind of hit on it with you. But your top rookie of daily fantasy and then your top rookie for season long. And I'm guessing your season long is going to be Emmanuel Mudiay. And then your daily, I'm going to guess, is also Emmanuel Mudiay. But let me see if I'm guessing right.
You're guessing absolutely right. Although the Miles Turner for season long is awfully tasty.
No, okay, I scratched that. You have to take Miles Turner for season long. You have to.
Yeah, because he's just gonna help you out in more categories. Mudiay's. I don't know Mudiay's defense. I don't think anybody knows. I don't even know if Mudiay knows Mudiay's defense. But we know he's going to get you points and assists, and that's for daily. Thumbs up on that one.
But he's going to kill your field goal percentage in season because he cannot shoot.
Yeah, and I mean, can he shoot free throws? Who knows?
Question mark. Question mark. 12 games in China.
Exactly. So, I think he's going to be a great daily play. I think he's going to be affordable at the beginning of the season. But, any point guard who you can get for like $7,000 who's going to be on the court for 32, 35, 37 minutes, you jump on him. There will be bumps in the road, but I think ultimately he's going to be like a top 15 daily fantasy point guard by the All-Star break.
All right, guys, so we're now leaning into our final topics here or the final topic before the show ends. Now, if you have a question that you want to get on the show, you can actually call into the show right now, 916-273-9777. Get your daily fantasy, get your season-long fantasy questions answered right now. Feel free to call in. The number, once again, is 916-273-9777. And this is the final topic, and I didn't kind of warn you about it, so I'm just going to throw you for a curveball right now. But that is players that value is on the rise. And I have the top name for it right now, and I think you're gonna agree with me, and that's Greg Monroe in Milwaukee.
Daily wise, his value has been like off the charts since maybe the first month to the season. He's a daily fantasy stud. Probably, as I mentioned, I do this thing called the FanDuel 15, and he was constantly in the top 5, and the FanDuel 15 is not a scientific list of this is the guy who gets you the best value for the money. It's a combination of real-time stats and FanDuel value and the Alan Goldsher eye test. And Monroe passed the eye test like every time I saw the Pistons play. I think it was a genius pickup by the Bucks. It was a genius place for him to go. He's going to thrive there. He's going to own the middle. He's going to be like a walking double-double. He's going to be like the Zach Randolph of the East.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison. That is the perfect comparison.
I love me some Greg Monroe, man, and I think he's almost like a third-round pick, even possibly a second-round pick.
I completely agree.
In season long, but you know who a first-round pick is that Andre Drummond, his old running buddy.
If he is if he can be consistent or half of consistent of what he did in the USA scrimmage, Detroit basketball is back. Like that. Oh man, that is going to be a team with Reggie Jackson, Stanley Johnson, KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Andre Drummond. I mean, that is a Ersan Ilyasova, Ghost-faced Illy. That is a team right there, and they're building it like that old Orlando team with Dwight Howard was. And if they can build something, if he can take that toll on Andre Drummond's value is on the rise fast.
Yeah, and the Central Division's kind of in flux right now. You know, my Bulls are kind of, pains me to say, but they are kind of stabilizing, if not kind of downtrending a little bit. And the Pistons might just fill that void. Indiana's kind of stepped up a little bit. So all of a sudden, you know, the Central Division is going to be a really interesting place to be. One thing I'm really curious about the Pistons, and I've written about this a whole lot, is what are they going to do with Jackson and Brandon Jennings?
Brandon Jennings gets traded. I put anything on that. He gets traded by trade deadline.
Which, if they can get an asset for him, that would be terrific.
They won't, but I mean, they're going to trade him. They're going to have that Josh Smith effect.
The Josh Smith effect, addition by subtraction.
Yes.
No, I think Greg Monroe is a great guy on the rise. You hit me for a loop on this one. Who else do you have?
Another person that I have whose value is possibly on the rise. Again, this is why I kind of call him a sleeper, but I think Mason Plumlee's value is going to be on the rise because of the situation that he's in. Another person who I think's value is going to be on the rise is his name is blanking me because I didn't write it down, but I was like going through teams and it was floating through my head, and it's the Memphis team. It's not rising a lot, but it's going to be Matt Barnes. I think his role in Memphis is going to make him a little bit better because I feel like that they would do a lineup to where Tony Allen can start at the 2 and Matt Barnes starts at the 3, and then have Courtney Lee be that 6th man. And if that's the case, he's going to be shooting a lot more 3-pointers. He's still going to do the dirty work of playing defense. I mean, fantasy-wise, value-wise, he's going to go up. Maybe not season-long-wise, it won't change anything, but daily, because of what he can do on just depending on who the matchup is, he's going to be given a lot of shots and to see what he can do.
Matt Barnes was always a really interesting daily play because I'm an anal retentive guy. I'm going to look at some numbers right now. There were periods where he would get you 32 FanDuel points, 25 FanDuel points, 45 FanDuel points, and his cap hit never went above $5,100. And there was one point he went on a run near the end of the season and in the playoffs where he was floating around 4,500, 4,900, and he was consistently getting 20 to 30 FanDuel points a night. And he would break out for games once in a while too. And Memphis needs offense outside of, their big 3. They need to find somebody else who can put the ball in the basket. That ain't Courtney Lee. That ain't Tony Allen. And it could be Matt Barnes.
What do you think about a guy like Arron Afflalo as well as a fantasy riser? Only because this is why I have him as a fantasy riser and possibly even a sleeper, because a lot of people are forgetting how good he was in Orlando. And he's now going to a team to New York, who is a band of misfit toys that are probably a little bit broken, except for, but Jose Calderon is their starting point guard, and their best point guard on their roster is Jerry Grant, and we really don't even know fully who he is. Jose Calderon hopefully plays around 40 games. I mean, we don't really know how many games he can actually play. So Arron Afflalo is going to play point guard. I'm calling it right now. He will play point, and he will shoot threes, and he can pass, and he can actually rebound well for him. The only thing about him is he needs to stay healthy.
He does. And my line about the Knicks is somebody has to score. They're not going to score 30 points a night. Carmelo Anthony is not going to get every point. So Arron Afflalo will score. It's inevitable. I think that putting him at the point at times is a very reasonable idea. I like Grant. I think he's going to be a starter in this league. I don't know if it'll be this year. And I also don't hate Langston Galloway too much. He put up some good fantasy games, some good daily games last season. But when you got Carmelo Anthony on the team, he is like the biggest ball stopper in the league, and it eats into everybody's shots. And that's why I'm always nervous about taking any Knick, and I'm any Laker when Kobe is in massive ball stop mode, which he will be this year. Any Rocket, because James Harden he does not like passing the ball unless they're good players. They will get you numbers, but with Daly, you gotta be a little sure. And just any Knick other than Anthony, is he going to get the shots up? And if I drop my $5,000 on him, and he gets 6 shots because Carmelo decided he wanted to shoot the ball 30 times, you feel pretty bad about the whole transaction.
Melo's going to get 15 to 20 shots a game. I'm telling, if Arron Afflalo starts at point guard and stays healthy, if he can average 4 assists, 4 to 5 rebounds, and 16 points with 2 3-pointers. And shooting averages around 48%, and of course he's going to hit his free throws around like 82% or whatever. His turnovers are going to be pretty low. I mean, he can post up most point guards in the league right now. Maybe not Russell Westbrook, but I mean, most point guards in the league, he's going to be able to work a little bit. And so, I mean, I kind of feel like if he's healthy, he's one of those players that everyone is looking at as like, oh, he's kind of lost his step. He's older. He's always injury prone. He's kind of one of those guys that I think he should have been in our sleeper segment, but his fantasy value is definitely on the rise, in my opinion, both season long and daily, because he's going to be a guy that's going to have the ball in his hands. I know Melo's a ball stopper, but he's also one of my favorite players, so don't hurt my feelings too much with that.
I've broken your heart with Carmelo and Ben McLemore. I feel really bad now.
Yeah.
You've been such a good host, and here I am.
I mean, you're going to make me cry a little bit, but that's okay. I'm over it.
I'm sorry, Vince. I agree with you about Afflalo in season long. I think especially if you're in like a 12-team league, if you can nab him in one of the final 3 rounds, I think you're doing really well for yourself. Daily, I'm just really nervous about the Knicks, about any Knick in general, other than Anthony. I'm just going to take a wait and see attitude. I do like Robin Lopez as a low end center play. Like if you decide you want to blow your budget, try and get 2 studs. Like okay, how can I get Anthony Davis and James Harden on the roster? How can I get Russell Westbrook and Carmelo on the roster? You suck it up and take a flyer on Robin Lopez if the Knicks are playing, Toronto, and Toronto's on, has just flown from Sacramento to New York, and the Patrick Patterson or whoever's going to be Valanciunas, whoever's playing center that night, I'll pay my $4,000, $5,000 for Robin Lopez to see what he can do on a situation like that.
Last player that I feel whose value is on the rise, and then I'm going to go on the opposite side and go fantasy value who is dropping, who was a star stud last season. So last player that I have that's on the rise while we're closing out here, we have right around like 6 minutes left.
Okay.
Rajon Rondo. And I know ESPN is completely against it. Brand new system, brand new team, worst acquisition. I've seen it. I read about it. But at the same time, George Karl is going to give him the ball in a fast-paced offense in which there really is no system. It's space, pace, pass, and shoot. That's all it is in George Karl's offense, and take risks. So on defensively, like that means pick for the ball. And if Rondo can get, he's not going to make free throws. He's not going to make 3-pointers, but he'll pass the ball. And if he can find a way to make layups again, he has the chance of being a really better than Emmanuel Mudiay.
I will give 2 answers to that one. One, I loved Darren Collison last year.
Me too.
Before he got hurt, he was running the team well. He was a terrific daily fantasy option. I mean, there was a period where he was costing, and I'm going to look this up here because that's the way I roll. He was costing like a good chunk of FanDuel change, like around 7,500. He even hit 7,800 at one point, but he was earning it. He was scoring between 26 and 45 FanDuel points a night. When he got hurt, he was averaging 28.9 FanDuel points, which is like that's second tier point guard stuff. Rondo, on the other hand, was averaging wish I'd prepared. I could have these numbers right off the top of my head.
I know. I threw you for a curve. I completely apologize.
And you'd have been like, dude, you are so slick. But as is, I mean, he was mediocre with Boston. He was brutal in Dallas. And, maybe he can resurrect himself in Sacramento. If anyone can do it, George Karl can.
As producer Joe would say, this is his last chance, or he'll be on Dancing with the Stars next season.
Or like being grouchy with the Stars.
See, that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, this is Rondo's last shot before, he's out. So, I mean, we're going to see what happens with him. Now, the next player that I want to get on for down the downfall now, and that is LaMarcus Aldridge, who was a star last season, who I feel, because of Greg Popovich, because of the way San Antonio runs their team a little bit, could see his fantasy value drop because they're going to rest him. They're going to make sure he's healthy for the playoffs, and he has a lot of help out there.
I could not agree with you more. And daily-wise, I am scared of every Spur. Even Kawhi Leonard, who last year averaged over 30 minutes a game, it's still nerve-wracking because when Pop pulls those, last-minute scratches, I've already put him in my lineup and I'm eating dinner. I can't get to the computer when I find out that Kawhi is sitting. Kawhi didn't even know he was sitting until after the layup line. So I'm really nervous about any Spur, and I agree with you completely. Aldridge is not going to get his 35 minutes a night. He's going to get DNP CDs throughout the season, and he's going to have a phenomenal year. But he's going to also be, a top 20 pick in a season long, and he's going to cost you almost $10,000 in daily. And none of those numbers jibe with 29 minutes a night.
Yeah, definitely. And he's just one of those guys where he's going to be taking a lot of mid-range shots. I don't know if Tim Duncan's going to be one of those guys where it's going to be bumping. I don't know how this is really going to work with Tim Duncan and LaMarcus, and I could be completely off base, and you can be like, oh, this is kind of crazy, blah, 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 but I just don't know how this system is going to work with two guys that space the floor. I mean, with David Robinson and Tim Duncan back in the day, that was a team that in which David Robinson could play strong defense, can get you down low in the post, and Tim Duncan can kind of space it out a little bit because David Robinson was the guy before Tim Duncan was. Now, LaMarcus Aldridge is the guy, but he can't post down low. He doesn't do that. He's a mid-range guy, and Tim Duncan's at that point in his age where if you put him down low, he can do it, but for how long? How many minutes in a game can he do that for?
And you're absolutely right. On paper, those are all completely legitimate arguments, but just from the perspective of Duncan is the ultimate brainiac veteran, and Aldridge is at the point in his career where I suspect he will be willing to do what he needs to do to win a ring. I think they'll figure it out. They might not figure it out in December, but I think by April, I wouldn't want to play the Spurs in the playoffs.
Last question, and it's a ridiculous question, but because of the rumor, it's a rumor that came out right before we started this show, and I saw it on Bleacher Report and everything like that. It's about Derrick Rose and the alleged things that he did. If this becomes...
I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I missed it. What happened?
I have a 2-year-old daughter as well. That's awesome. She just turned 2 on the 15th of this month. But what happened was...
Oh, my God, dude, mine did too.
No way. 2 years old on the August 15th?
Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That August 15th babies represent.
All right. August 15th babies. Woo woo. Happy birthday. Now, hopefully, Derrick Rose never meets my daughter if this is actually true, because this is what he allegedly did. What Derrick Rose allegedly did was and this is from Bleacher Report and TMZ and all that stuff, but he drugged his ex-girlfriend.
No.
And he and his friends, and I quote, gangbanged her.
Oh, that breaks my heart.
So, and it's Derrick Rose. He's one of those guys that everyone goes is the nice guy, the sweetheart, the sweetheart of the NBA. So,
I hope that's not true.
I hope it's not true either. And the way that I read it, it's not true. The way that I read it, it came off as she's looking as for some money because she waited 2 years, and because I don't know, her reasoning was ridiculous. Everyone go read it on Bleacher Reports, on TMZ.com, whatever. I'm not here to talk about that type of stuff. But let's say it is true and he gets traded. Because, I mean, that's the potential of it already happening because Jimmy Butler's star is rising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there have been whispers about him getting moved. The contract is so difficult, though, and to make the numbers work.
Sacramento would do it. Sacramento would do it all day long. They would trade Rondo for Derrick. And tell me Chicago wouldn't do that. Derrick Rose for a 1-year deal of $9.5 million for Rajon Rondo. The Kings take on a contract of, 3 years still left on his deal? And I don't know the exact price of it. I don't know what they would have to work. But if that was ever a possibility on the table, Sacramento is right now on the stage of we believe in second chances. I mean, that's why they took Rondo.
The reason that I think that trade as constructed probably wouldn't happen is because the Bulls, for all of their weirdness in the front office, are very concerned about locker room culture, and they haven't brought in a guy like a Rondo type of personality in years. And I think they would be really leery to take on someone who could mess up what is a team that has really, really good interpersonal chemistry. They don't always look as one on the court, but they have one of the best locker rooms in the league, and Rondo is not a locker room guy, never has been, never will be. But I think the Bulls would entertain trade offers. I don't think that anything is off the table with them. I mean, they've, whispers about Joakim Noah being traded, and I wrote a whole article. There was, you'll probably appreciate this one, a certain other daily fantasy website who shall remain nameless because I don't want to give them any shine, suggested that the Bulls trade Noah to the Celtics for.
Throw the name out there. I want to know.
It was. I will not give them.
Do it. Don't be afraid. Make the Fantasy Hoops podcast awesome. Do it.
Okay, so I wrote an article completely trashing DraftKings suggestion that
there it is.
that the Bulls trade Joakim Noah to the Celtics for Jared Sullinger and a bunch of garbage. It worked numbers wise, but it was something like Noah going out to the Celtics and the Bulls getting like 2 power forwards and Avery Bradley in return, who equal or do not match what's already on the Bulls roster. I ran the numbers, and Avery Bradley and Tony Snell's per 36 minutes. His averages were like super close, so Avery Bradley doesn't make sense. And, bringing Jared Sullinger and whatever other power. Oh, Kelly Olynyk, they don't need another big. The Bulls are like overloaded with bigs. So yeah, I kind of trashed them. Numbers don't lie.
Bang, 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 bang. Shots fired to DraftKings.com. But yeah, that I brought up the Derrick Rose thing because, like you said in the beginning, you're like based out there in Chicago. You're out there. That's why you know a little bit more Jahlil Okafor. So I thought maybe you heard the news and maybe had some more insight on it or anything. But, I mean, it just broke today. TMZ just had it. So, actually, our producer, Joe, actually has a question for you fantasy-wise, especially since he's a fantasy rook over here. So, what's that question, Producer Joe?
Oh, no, brother. This has nothing to do with fantasy. This is real life.
Uh-oh.
Okay, the question is what I ask every guest before we let him go.
Stop. Don't ask him this. It's fantasy. They don't care about
he knows. He knows. He's going to give me an answer, and he's going to see you go in the river.
I'm telling you right now, he's going to agree with me.
No way. Okay, so the bet that we have going is simple. Kings make the playoffs, I get to throw him in the river. Kings don't make the playoff, the Sacramento River. Kings don't make the playoffs, he gets to throw me in the river. Pick a side.
Let me ask you this. How dirty is that river?
Oh, man, it's I'd say it's pretty clean. I mean, I wouldn't eat the fish, but,
But so if Vince does get thrown in the river, it's not going to hurt him.
No. We're not talking about the Yangtze or anything.
If Vince gets thrown in the river, are you saying the Kings make the playoffs?
No, I actually spaced out as to who was taking the game. You know what? They're going to be good. DeMarcus could, they're always an interesting team to watch as long as DeMarcus Cousins is healthy and on point. And if they were in the East, maybe. But the West is just so stacked. It's so stacked. So I'm going to have to say no.
He goes with me. Oh. He goes with me. That's another person on my side. I have the play-by-play announcer who does it for the radio out here for a couple of games is Jason Ross. I don't know if you know who that is at all. But he's actually in on this bet as well. So everyone go on the Kings or listen to the Kings Court Sunday nights from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to hear more about this bet. We talk about it all the time. We give away Kings tickets. So if you are Sacramento Kings fans, you're listening, we do give away tickets. We do contests. We do all things like that. But Alan, this has been an awesome show. I appreciate you coming on. You know I'm going to be asking to get you on again. We've talked multiple times about possibly you being our fantasy expert both daily and season long throughout the entire season. So we'll see how the schedule plays out. We'll work on more details on that. But regardless,
love to come back, and I'd like to thank you for giving me a couple minutes to yammer about hoops. And I'd like everybody to go and visit FanDuel.com. And if you want to check out some of my scribblings, FanDuel.com/insider. The new site launches on the 31st. It's going to be sexy and beautiful. We got some heavyweight designers making the thing look really stellar, and we're all really proud. And I hope that you guys come and check us out.
Sexy, beautiful, and heavyweight. Let's do it.
That's exactly what they call me every time I go in public.
All right, Alan. Everyone go follow Alan. Again, Alan Goldsher on Twitter. Follow myself. I am at VM Center. Tune into this show every Wednesday from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Eastern Standard Time, just add 3 hours to that, and you actually have it. I think that is it. That's all the final and closing thoughts I have. So until next time, Fantasy Hoop fans, bye-bye.